Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Tamin Inc., a full-service accessibility and technology practice. Tamin partners with organizations of all sizes to shift mindsets and empower people. Wherever you are on your inclusive journey, Tamin's team can help you with web accessibility assessments and accessible digital solutions. Tamin believes that access to information is a human right, so head on over to tamininc.com to get more information. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certification and get yours today. How you doing, Chad?
I'm doing well. It's a rainy, gloomy day here in the Northeast. And it looks like it's going to be that way for a couple of days, but it looks like Thursday it's going to break and hopefully the sun's going to come out again.
It has been sunny for a couple of days, so I have been able to work on my koi pond. So for the koi pond talk for everyone, for those who've been following, my koi pond is now no longer leaking. And so I have spent the last month and a half and lots more money than I wish to admit chasing this leak, and I have solved it. And so the next thing is just buttoning up some of the plumbing that's on the exterior and getting that all squared away. I bought this new air filter that's super quiet. And so like tail end stages, man. Reveal party is coming soon.
All right. Yeah. We're going to have a koi pond party at Dax's house.
Exactly. Koi pond reveal.
Awesome. Well, listen, we have an exciting guest on the podcast today. We have Eve Hill, who is a disability rights attorney and consultant at Brown, Goldstein, and Levy. And the reason that we're really excited about having Eve on today is because, you know, Dax and I will often, you know, kind of have a cursory discussion about like the legal ramifications of your website or your documents not being accessible. But today we have somebody who is actually knowledgeable on this topic, and we're really excited to talk to her. Eve, welcome to the podcast.
Great. Happy to be here.
It's so awesome to have you here today. Chad and I often talk, you know, we'll talk about the legal requirements, but, you know, we're not lawyers. And matter of fact, we joke and we say, I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on the podcast. And so it's so nice to actually have someone who is an actual lawyer. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in relation to accessibility in the, you know, in this world?
Well, I'm an ADA lawyer and consultant, so I both enforce the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 508 and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And I help companies, businesses, state and local governments to comply, to implement good practices so that they result in compliance. And I do that across a wide array of contexts. So I was just saying I have a case regarding blind prisoners right now, as well as a case against the Veterans Administration for not serving homeless vets. But I also do it in the digital space. So we also work a lot on both cases and helping as a consultant that are about websites and other technology that needs to be accessible to people with disabilities. Mostly people with print disabilities, but also people with hearing disabilities. So I do a lot of both litigation and consulting, helping entities do the right thing.
Eve, one of the things that I think a lot of people are struggling with is usually the accessibility department in a company is one or two people in a large organization. In fact, I used to work for an organization that had 50,000 people in it, and our accessibility department was 3 people. And as you might, you know, understand that that sometimes is a big struggle for us, because when we're trying to convince others in our organization to make our content accessible, there's a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
And so my question to you would be, how do you start that conversation in a realistic way to tell your supervisors kind of what they could be in for if in fact they do get sued?
Right. Well, the first part of the conversation is, don't you want all the customers who want your service? So it's not just about the lawsuit, and that's not necessarily the reason to make your website accessible. You should make your website
Agreed.
accessible because you want customers. And accessibility helps not just customers with disabilities, but it makes better websites and better documents that everybody can use. So that's the reason to do it. The secondary reason, and I don't mind if you do it because of the lawsuit, is the lawsuit. So you can get sued and you can lose under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that can cost you money and customers and reputation. And that's a really bad situation to be put in. So that's how I start the conversation. First, it's the right thing. There are millions and millions and millions of people with disabilities and their families and friends who care about these issues. And if you don't know whether your website is accessible, it isn't. And we will know that it's not accessible because it's not hard to figure out. So then the question becomes, well, what resources do we dedicate to that? And you need expertise. You need an office with expertise, but you also need to build accessibility into all your development. All your content creators should know how to make a document accessible. That's where the rubber really meets the road, is when you create the first document or when you create the first web page. That person needs to know how to make it accessible. It ain't hard. It's a doable thing, but you need to know to do it, and then you need to actually do it. And so you need expertise for the complicated stuff in your accessibility office, and then you need the basics distributed throughout your content creators. And then you need a voice from the C-suite saying, this is important. I want it done. It needs to be done, and I'm monitoring and checking it so I will know if it's not done.
Buy-in from the top, Chad, is so important, right?
Oh, it's super important. I mean, what we run into a lot, what Dax and I run into is there's typically a couple of core people within the organization that see the value in doing this work. Yeah. The people who are boots on the ground, they understand this, they know that it's important, but they can't get the higher ups to see the value of why they should spend money on this, why they should invest time and energy into this. And, Dax and I are often brought in to speak to those C-suite executives to explain to them, like, hey, guys, this is why it's important for you guys to be accessible. Whether it's and I kind of lump websites and documents into the same category because one typically leads to the other, right? If you want to make your website accessible, the documents on that website need to be accessible too.
Right.
What I wanted to know from you, Eve, is when you talk about, so Dax and I, you'll often hear us say that some accessibility is better than no accessibility. And so I'm really curious, the lawsuits that you see, is it because they're not fully compliant, or is it because their website has egregious problems with it that inherently make the website inaccessible?
Both things happen. So it's important when you're remediating a website that's not accessible, that you focus on the things that people most need. Why do they come to your website? Make sure those are the things that you prioritize first. Then you want to achieve across the board compliance. You can get sued either way because you're failing. The standard is effective communication. Your communications with people with disabilities need to be just as effective as your communications with people without disabilities. And to do that, you need to make your website accessible according to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, 2.1 now, level AA. But in order to get to that, you can't do it immediately or necessarily overnight. So you want to prioritize the things that are most important. Why are people coming to your website? What are they trying to get there? Make sure that they can get through the user way, get through what a user would want to use on your website, and then focus on the less important things later. but do focus on them because you can get sued for technical noncompliance as well as noncompliance that really hurts people. And what I always advise folks is have a way to avoid a demand letter. You don't want the only way that someone can communicate an error to you or a problem to you to be through a demand letter. You want to have an email address that is actually monitored and responded to so the person can say, hey, I can't do this. I need to get this done. And then you can fix it and avoid a demand letter. So those are really important things.
Well, it's interesting that we tell people, or at least I tell people, that an accessibility statement on your website goes a long way to be able to say, these are the things that we know we're doing right. Here are some things that we're working on. And by the way, here's a way to contact us if there's something else that we missed. Because like you said, that doesn't immediately knee-jerk reaction a lawsuit. Someone's going to say, oh, hey, there's this keyboard trap in your pop-up for whatever, and you can take care of it. But without that, at least, hey, we're working on this kind of statement.
It's really, it encourages patience. If you know that you have accessibility problems and you're working on them and you're transparent about the fact that you're working on them, it encourages me to be patient with you. Because if you don't have an accessibility statement and I know your website's not accessible, I assume you don't know and you don't care.
Right. Well, so let's talk through the steps, right? So we're talking about the kind of this thing. So the first thing that you can do to help kind of mitigate or reduce the possibility of a lawsuit is to address what we call born accessibility, putting the accessible components in as you develop them. But you get to a certain point, you put an accessibility statement on your website, you monitor an email or form, some communication, right? But that doesn't work, and for some reason, you get the demand letter. Is that typically the first step? Let's walk through the steps of what it looks like for someone going through the process of this litigation.
Once a lawyer gets involved, the first step is usually a demand letter. Sometimes the first step is a complaint in court, so not everybody sends a demand letter. And that's the best practice for lawyers to send a demand letter because sometimes you can resolve things without having to go to court. So I generally send a demand letter. That's your first warning. That's your first shot across the bow, if you like, to say, look, there's a problem here. I've gotten a lawyer involved. I want this fixed. This is a real priority. And that's your first, well, actually, hopefully your second opportunity to actually make the fixes that you need. So what you want to be able to do if you're in really good shape is to respond to that demand letter by saying, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Here's our plan. We already have a plan in progress. We just haven't gotten to the thing that you're complaining about yet. So here's our plan. And that'll again encourage patience. And it'll also move the things that they're complaining about up on your priority list so you can get to those things early. If you don't already have a plan, then you're in a much more difficult situation. And you need to respond by saying, here's the plan we're going to use. And have that be a real plan. So you want to bring in your consultants at that point to say, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get this done? And how quickly can we get it done? Dragging your feet on it is not going to help. That does not encourage patience on the behalf of the blind person or the person with a hearing disability. So ideally you want to be able to respond to, here's the plan we already have. If you don't have that, then you want to be able to respond with, here's the plan we just came up with bringing in consultants to do. But you'll need to respond quickly. By the time you get a demand letter, the patience is drawing thin and people are ready to file. So the next step after that, if you don't get an agreement, so at that point, once you get a demand letter, you're probably going to have to enter into an agreement with this person. It's no longer an informal thing. You've got a lawyer involved. You're going to have a settlement agreement with them. You may have to pay their attorney's fees some money. You may, depending on what state you're in, have to pay the blind or deaf person some damages. They're not huge damages. They're not huge attorney's fees, but you may have to pay them because they invested. They had to come they had to come this far to get your
right.
Right.
The next step is the complaint in court.
Okay. So the next step is you actually go to court, right? And then you let the legal system, do its thing. In that demand letter, Eve, do you typically give them a period of time to comply?
In the demand letter, we generally give them a period of time to respond to us with what their response is. They may say, no, we don't care about disability, accessibility. Go ahead and sue us. That response comes, believe it or not.
Does it really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They may respond that they need more time to get a plan together. They may respond that they have a plan and they want to talk to us about it. So there are a bunch of different responses, and sometimes they do respond, we don't care, go away. I dare you to file suit, basically.
Wow. I would never imagine that would be a response.
Ever. Oh, it is.
Do you like those, Eve?
I like that.
Do you like when they say clear? I'm just gonna say, go ahead. It's got to be awesome, man. You're like, okay, let's throw down, right?
Yeah. Okay. I don't feel bad about this at all.
Yeah, now things are going to get fun, right? So that's really interesting. And so you first give them a period of time to respond, and what is that typically? 2 weeks, a month? A couple of weeks. So they got a couple of weeks to respond, and hopefully, right? I mean, what for all of the parties involved, the hope is that they respond and say, yes, you're right. We know about this. We're actively working on it, and we're hoping to get this resolved in, and I know development.
3 months, probably.
Yeah,
right?
Development timelines are very. They're not like, oh, we'll get it done in 2 days, right?
Right.
Typically with development, they're like, oh, it's going to take us 3 months to get this resolved. And so I guess at that point, you guys could choose to say, okay, that's acceptable.
Right.
Or no, that's not acceptable, right? Because, I mean, if we're talking about like a consumer website and the person is trying to purchase an item, it could be a car, it could be a boat, it could be a widget, right? It doesn't really matter what it is, but they're trying to purchase this, and they've now encountered this roadblock. And so if they say it's going to take us 3 months to resolve this, well, now they got to wait 3 months to be able to buy the thing that they're trying to purchase, right? And I guess that my question is, like, how acceptable is that, right? I mean, I can say, like, for most of us, it's not acceptable. Like, if I'm on a website trying to buy your thing and I can't buy that thing, I don't know that I'm willing to wait 3 months for that. So right. I'm just curious, how does that work? How does that play out?
Well, generally, we recognize that you can't reverse time. And so that it does take a little time to make the things accessible. How much time we're willing to give you depends on how important the thing is that the client is trying to access. Is it medical care? You don't have 3 months. You got to get that worked out now. Is it, vaccine appointments for the COVID vaccine during the pandemic? That was really important. You can't wait a long time to get your act together on that. So it depends. But was I trying to buy a pair of jeans? Yeah, I'll take the hit. I'll wait for that, or I'll get it another way.
I got to believe as a company, if someone tries to, if I'm going through this process and you say you can't get this or buy this on my website, I'm going to get on the phone with you and we're going to make it happen. I am going to get you. I'm going to get you this product. I know that there is we were at John Slayton Access U conference in Texas, and someone had brought up the fact that they had bought a Samsung washer and dryer, and that because the interface is very digital, they couldn't operate it because the screens told you what to do, and there was no tactile interface.
Right.
Someone from Japan flew to this person's house and applied the tactile stickers on and then made sure that the person understood how to use it. I mean, and to me that's impressive and shows a level of detail that, that is, or a level of caring, I guess, that really makes it important. In fact, we have Samsung washer and dryers when I was choosing. And you know what? This is actually a really interesting point. I could pick any washer and dryer I wanted. I didn't really have a major budget. I had a pretty big price range. I picked the Samsung ones because of that story.
Yeah,
And
that's
I don't have
customer
a disability, and I'm not. I don't. Well, I have a disability. I have ADHD, but I don't have one that requires the tactile interfaces. But because that company cared, it influenced my decision to buy $2,000 worth of washer and dryer. So it does matter.
Yeah, the goodwill effects of accessibility and of just good customer service are immeasurable. And being open, really, your first response has to be, "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We're on it."
It's funny because I was I was at a barber and I was getting my hair cut and I was talking to him about what I did. And I said, we were talking about Instagram and, how would a blind, I said, well, think about this. If you're on Instagram and you're blind, how do you know what the images are? He goes, blind people go on Instagram? Why would they do that? And it reminded me of a story I told him. I said, there was a lawsuit where a guy sued a car company because their website was inaccessible. And the question from the car company was, why does a blind person need to buy a car anyway? And so we had a long conversation about safety features and color and the all of the things that are not, can I see the car and drive it, that really still make a person, whether you're a male, female, whatever you are, as a person who wants to purchase a car. It's not just because you're the head of the household or because you're the one paying the money. It's everyone should be able to understand and know what it is that you're getting into and trusting your life with as you roll down the freeway 60 miles an hour.
That's right.
Right. So let me ask you, in Canada, they have AODA. And AODA requires that everyone, if your company has more than 50 employees, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, if your company has more than 50 employees, you're required to make all your content, web content accessible, regardless of whether it's public or private or whatever. Do you feel that wave is eventually going to make its way to the United States?
I do, because websites don't really pay much attention to borders. And so the expectation is out there that all content on the web will be accessible, and people are not going to put up with it anymore. Blind people are not going to put up with it anymore. Deaf people are not going to put up with it anymore. They're, number one, going to go to your competitors, but they're, number two, going to file lawsuits against you. The most recent figures indicated there were like 96% of the top websites have accessibility barriers, an average of 50 something barriers per homepage. That's ridiculous. And it's getting worse instead of better. So the patience has run very thin on being willing to accept a second-class citizenship on the web.
Now, Eve, when we were talking before the podcast here, you brought something up, and it was something that I was not really aware of. You had said that the ADA applies to everyone.
Private businesses.
Right? So private businesses.
Yeah. Okay. There are 12 categories of private businesses that it applies to, but it's most everything. Any retail business is covered. Hotels, transportation, all kinds of businesses are covered under the ADA, and they have the obligation to provide effective communication with people with disabilities, including vision disabilities and hearing disabilities. So if you're communicating to the public with your website, that website needs to communicate to people with disabilities, which means it has to be accessible. And the only defenses to that are that it's an undue burden, meaning it would be too expensive to do in light of all your resources. So it's not just in light of your accessibility budget. It's in light of all your resources. And the other defense is that it would be a fundamental alteration. There's almost nothing in a website that would be a fundamental alteration to make accessible. So that's sort of a lost cause if you're aiming on relying on that. But undue burden, I'm very skeptical of undue burden defenses. People will say, "Oh, it's too expensive. It's too expensive," and I say it wouldn't have cost you anything if you'd done it right the first time. It is not my fault. You built an inaccessible website and now have to pay money to fix it.
Well, and I guess that's a bit of a hard pill to swallow. Like if you're a $12 billion company and you're saying that it's too expensive to make your website accessible.
Yeah, I'm not buying that at all.
That's a tough one.
Well, let's take an example that I actually received an email, I think it was last year. So we run a PDF accessibility Facebook group. It has about almost 4,400 members in it. And occasionally we get, yeah. And I started it in 2016, at the end of 2016, and it's grown immensely. It's a really great group. But I received an instant message from someone who said, I just joined your group. I'm a veterinarian. And one of my clients asked to make my home care documentation for their animal accessible. Right. I didn't understand what this was. I found your group, and what am I supposed to be doing this? What do I, am I required? I didn't think I was. And we had the conversation of, well, this applies mostly to government organizations, but also, you're trying to serve your customers, and these are your customers, so it would be the right thing to do. I wasn't really thinking about ADA with you mentioned there's a specific section in ADA or a specific
Title 3.
Title 3, that's
Title
what I was
3
thinking
covers
of. Title
businesses.
3.
And Title 2 covers state and local governments.
Gotcha. So what would you say to this person who says, I've got 150 PDFs in my cadre of care that I hand out to people about caring for their rabbit or their dog or their cat or whatever. And I'm only making, $200,000 or $300,000 a year in my practice. How does that play into undue burden? I'm just curious your thoughts.
Well, all those documents probably start out as a Word document. Keep it as a Word document, and you've pretty much covered it. You're really pretty accessible. So give them the Word version in an email, and then their screen reader will be able to use it most likely. If you've got things that you don't have the original Word version of, and you've got a PDF, then you can remediate it. Remediating a PDF is not rocket science. It can be done. You can get somebody to do it. And it's really important.
I think we know a few guys. We know a couple guys who could do that, right?
And it's really important. These are the home care instructions for taking care of your pet. This is not a frivolous request. This is, I need to know. And you, the veterinarian, give these to people for a reason, because you want them to follow these instructions. So you want your blind and hearing impaired customers to follow these instructions too.
And I mean, in that example you gave, Dax, I mean, a veterinarian, I got to believe that they've got a fair number of seeing eye dogs, right? So there's a good chance that your customer base, there could be a fair number of people who are in fact, visually impaired. And doing some like quick math, you had said, Dax, like, they have 150 PDFs on their website, right? Assuming they're like one-pagers, you're talking about like $2,000 to have all those documents remediated. And for a veterinarian, that's not like a huge amount of money to spend on that. If they're 2-pagers, you're looking at $4,000. So, it's not like we were talking about like undue burden, right? That's not a overly ridiculous expense for a business to have to incur to ensure, that they make their documents accessible. So one other question I have, it feels like the ADA is very similar to the AODA. Am I wrong in saying that?
It's a little different. It's less prescriptive than the AODA. The AODA says you have to make the website accessible. You have to make it comply with WCAG 2.1 level AA or 2.0 they may be using. And so it's very specific that the content on the website has to be accessible. The ADA is a little more flexible. If there is another way to make it equally effective, then you can use another way. We haven't found another way. And the ADA currently doesn't specify what the standard is for accessibility. So if you found a way other than WCAG 2.1, then you're free to use it.
Oh, I see.
So, and that's why I try to correct people when they say, oh, my document isn't ADA. And I'm like, it's not really the correct terminology, because ADA doesn't really have anything in it about document accessibility. Right. It says that you need to have equal access, that you need to treat people equally. But really Section 508 or WCAG in itself, is the statute that says you must meet with these criteria in your document. So
yeah, for government entities, it's different. For federal government entities, they have to meet Section 508. They have to meet WCAG 2.0. They have to. There's no other option for them. And for state and local governments, the Justice Department's putting out a regulation now that will also specify a technical standard for web accessibility.
Right. And we have AB 1757, AB 434 here in California.
Right.
And so I used to work for the California High-Speed Rail, and actually in 2016-17, when it first started rolling out as the mandate for AB 434, they came into our office and knocked on the door and said, okay, everything has to be accessible. And my answer was, who knows what that is? And so as somebody with ADHD, I got laser focused on it, and it really just became my life's passion after that. Yeah. And, kind of led us down the road to where we are today.
And that's a good point. There are state laws too.
Colorado's one that's coming up in June, July, I think. Right. So I think they kind of followed suit after California. To my knowledge, they're the only two states that have like implicit regulations, or am I mistaken? Do you know, Eve?
Yeah, a bunch of states have things that require state government entities to make all their stuff accessible. Texas does. A bunch of places do.
Oh.
Okay. There's only about 10 different states. We have a slide on this, Chad, in our Designing with Accessibility in Mind slide deck. That's the map of the United States. And there's only, I think, about 10 or 12 states that don't really have any state-based legislation on accessibility, at least in some way, at the state level. So
I should have known that since I teach that class. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We have so many slides. I mean, you got to think, if you count all of our different classes and all the different slides we have, I bet we have 1,000 slides easily.
Wow.
So no worries. So what I'd like to do as we end our interview here, which has been really great, is to kind of leave people with some of the things that you would recommend that they do to start having that conversation, or minimize, some easy things they can do to avoid having to come see you with their day in court. But we'd love to hear that.
You should get your remediation plan going now, ahead of time, before you get a complaint. You should have a way for people to make complaints to you, because that's them avoiding a demand letter. And if you do your planning up front and get going on it, take it seriously, monitor it, that's going to save you from having a court tell you that you have to do it faster than you want to. So you want to prioritize the most important things, get your plan going, get remediation happening, and then stop digging. Make sure your content creators know how to make things accessible from the beginning. Then it doesn't cost you anything, and you're not making the problem worse.
And finally, I would love for you to share some contact information, because I know that there are remediation teams and individuals listening right now going, how can I get Eve come talk to my supervisors to tell them from your lips to their ears? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm at ehill@browngold.com. So ehill@brown like the color, gold like the color.com.
Awesome. So it's been amazing having you on. We really enjoyed this conversation, and it's such a long conversation. We could talk about this for another hour easily, but I feel like we've done some good things here. We've talked about what the risk is, what you can do to help ease that process, communicating with the individuals who can come onto your website, and it's okay to give them a way to complain. Don't be afraid to put that contact information out, because it helps avoid the whole idea of going to court. We've talked about some of the legislation that's out there and some of the ways that you can talk to your boss about accessibility and getting that accessibility plan together ahead of time. I think it's been a really good session. So thank you so much for being on the program.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Eve. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. Once again, we want to thank Tammin, who is sponsoring this podcast. Tammin's a full-service accessibility and technology practice and partners with organizations of all sizes to shift mindsets and empower people. So wherever you are in your inclusive journey, Tam and his team can help you with web accessibility assessments and accessible digital solutions. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.